Hi there, my name is Jocelyn Williams from Neurally Solutions, and I welcome you to tonight's webinar. It is called Homeschooling, Is It For Me? And our guest speaker tonight will be Emma Eppard. Before we begin, I'm going to read a disclaimer to you. I, Jocelyn Williams, am not a physician, psychologist, or credentialed mental health worker. The scope of my consultation services does not include the treatment or diagnosis of specific illness or disorders. If a client suspects that they may have an ailment, illness, or mental health concern that may require medical attention, they are encouraged to consult with a licensed physician without delay. So I am an educational consultant. Everything that we will be discussing tonight will be from an educational perspective. And as I said, our guest speaker is Emma Eppard. Welcome, Emma. Emma is a rapid prompting method practitioner, a classical conversations foundation and essential director, the founder of Autistic Able, a neurodevelopmental movement mom, and author of her brand new book, Motor Matters, The Importance of Developing Motor Skills in Our Autistic Sons. I personally started reading that book just earlier this week, and the first couple of pages just brought me to tears. It is so relatable. Emma is just an excellent author and writer and speaker, so I would encourage you to grab that book, and I believe it's on Amazon. Emma is passionate about all children receiving a rigorous and age-appropriate education with the right support. She has been homeschooling for 5 years with classical conversations and has been using the rapid prompting method. In the past 2 years, she has added neurodevelopmental movement to aid her children in reaching their potential. So during our webinar tonight, Emma will help answer the following questions. How much time is invested in daily activities if I choose to homeschool? How do I teach my limited or nonverbal child? What does a homeschool schedule look like? And what curriculum should I choose? And so without further delay, we'd like to take a moment now to welcome Emma and take it away, Emma. Oh, and by the way, please remember to mute your mic if you haven't. I hear a little echoing. And also, on the upper right-hand corner of my screen, I'm not sure where it is on your device, but on my screen, there's a chat box. And so you are welcome, as Emma's speaking, if questions come to your mind, please go ahead and type your questions in the chat box, and I will field those questions to her at the right time. Okay, so without any further delay, Emma, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. We're just going to dive right in with the questions. A lot of you know me to some degree or another, and I'm really excited to see several of you, so thank you. So let's start out with how much time to invest in daily activities when you're homeschooling. Something to consider is that often you're working one-on-one with your child. In the school system, that's often not the case, depending on your child. So at home, you don't want to translate 6 hours of public school into 6 hours of at-home school, per se. So I tend to, with my little kindergarten guy, I aim for 30 minutes one-on-one in a day and up to an hour in separate sections. And then with my 4th grader, she can do a fair amount of things independently, but I also aim about for 30 minutes to an hour face-to-face with her. But then I have my 12-year-old severely autistic son, where a lot of the things I do with him are one-on-one. However, what's super, super important is tolerance, both for the mom and for the child. If you're both ending up crying or having meltdowns or whatever it is, it's too long. And that is a two-way street, because as a mom and / teacher, you're human and you will get frustrated. So you need to find how you can move forward and increase to reasonable amounts of time, but you both have to be tolerant of them. Every person has about a 30-minute attention span. Even when you're old, after about 30 minutes, it breaks down. So 30 minutes into this talk, you will start listening less, even if you don't mean to. So that's something to consider. As kids get older, they do things independently, but I was just having a chat with some of my homeschool moms online, and they were all saying pretty much until 3rd grade, my kid does not do anything independently aside from like 5 minutes of handwriting. So with my little 5-year-old, I can say, write your ABCs. And that's about 5 minutes that he will do without me next to him. But that being said, I can use the siblings to read to him and other things like that. So you're talking about kindergarten, an hour, and then there's going to be more independent work as they get older. Late elementary, I would say you're doing 2 to 3 hours of actual schoolwork per day. And then high school, junior high, 4 hours, high school, 6 hours, because there's so much more content you're covering in high school. Now, when you're teaching your children at home, you want to think about, am I using 20 minutes of spelling time, or am I wanting them to master this spelling list? You have to decide, am I going for time right now or mastery right now? Don't go for both, because you'll be there for a while and again frustrated. So often I think about, if I spend 5 minutes on geography today and tomorrow and the next day, that's 25 minutes per week, and over the course of a month, they're going to know something about geography. A huge thing about time investment in daily activities is that it takes 6 to 8 weeks to establish a routine. This is true for public school teachers. This is true for private school teachers, and this is true for homeschool moms. So we've been home in my state for about 8 weeks, and just this week, my system started working. And that is how it is. I think after 2 weeks, we're like, oh, it's not working. But think about yourself. We all develop habits, and that doesn't happen in 2 weeks. I worked out for 1 whole week, guys, and then guess what? I stopped. So habits take time. So let's really think about your kids in that same way. And when you're in that 6 to 8 weeks, it feels like forever. It does. But then you get on the other side of it and you're like, yes, we have a rhythm going. So a couple of things and ways to cheat with daily activities. I don't know, cheat, but like hijack, is we do a fair amount of audiobooks, and I really advocate for classical books like Treasure Island, Chronicles of Narnia. Go old school. Like if it's before 1980, go old school, because you're going to get far more vocabulary. We like to watch a couple of TED Eds each day. They're educational TED Talks for kids. They're like 5 minutes or less. We watch CNN 10, which is 10 minutes of current events. And there's also a lot of wonderful podcasts. My good friend just told me about Classics for Kids podcast, and it's about different composers. They play a bit of the music and tell you some history. So these are all things you can be cooking while the podcast is playing. They could be watching a thing for 5 or 10 minutes while you're throwing in the laundry, because I know life is still happening. So think about some of those things. All right. How to teach my limited or nonverbal child. A lot of you are RPM friends in here that have autistic kids. So one thing I want you to remember is whenever you have a diagnosis, the first thing they do is they check if your child can hear. So if your kids can hear, play them audiobooks. Does that mean they're listening all the time? No. As a kid, were you listening all the time? No. But we're allowing and opening up the opportunity and exposure to more than the 3,000 words I use in a day. If I'm playing a video in the background about the muscular system, because that's what we're learning this week, they're hearing those things. Songs are catchy. Whether or not a child can speak, they can still, the songs will get stuck in your head. It's not about whether you're verbal or not. If I play you a song about the 15 times tables 7 times each day for a week, you're going to be in the shower doing that 15 times table song. It just is. So also with RPM, we're doing learning channels, but this applies to all children. Generally speaking, we say there's visual learners, kinesthetic learners, hands-on learners, all these things. Basically, we all learn in slightly different ways, but it's not stagnant. Some days my eyes are tired and I'm a more auditory learner. Some days I need to get my hands into something to understand it. So I would say try and meet your children with as many learning channels as possible, whether that's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or tactile. Don't always be like, well, he's an auditory learner, so I said it. No, you want to go more into how can I hit all of these different things and fully engage the child. Do you want to ask any questions now or keep going?
Nope, keep going.
Okay.
Now.
All right. So one of my taglines I use for myself, because my son doesn't sleep a lot, and I'm sure you have children that perhaps are similar, is I say to myself, grab 5 minutes. Sometimes I think, what could I do right now that takes 5 minutes? If I do geography and we point to 5 states and say the state and capital name 7 times, do you know what happens in 10 weeks? He knows the entire United States in 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes, I'm saying all those states and names. Then the next week, 5 more. We review the old ones and the new ones. This takes 5 minutes a day. And in 10 weeks, he knows the whole US. Then I can move on to a different continent and then bring that one back in and review. So think about grab 5 minutes. We all have 5 minutes. 5 minutes of spelling words, even if you're practicing 5 spelling words. 5 minutes for 5 new vocabulary words. And you review those each day. We all have 5 minutes. Routine. So a lot of times we talk about routine being good for children. I think it is, but I want you to think about your last week as a mother. Did it follow your beautiful routine, or did everything come together? No, that is not how life works. So while having goals for the day is great, but I would do them in different places in your house, in different orders at times, because we want our children to be flexible people, because that will prepare them for the world. Whether special needs or not, I still have to do the laundry, right? Sometimes I do it in the morning when I wake up. Sometimes I do it in the evening. Sometimes there's just a little wiggle room right after lunch. If I'm like, I can only do laundry in the morning, what happens if I can't every day for a week? So we want to teach our kids that same flexibility. In terms of limited and nonverbal children, I would recommend doing 2 RPM lessons per day, but talk to your child as though they can hear you, show them things, audiobooks, narrate your life, videos. Even if they're not looking, they're hearing new information. And also, like stated in my book, do motor planning with your special needs kids, because life is not just work. Like half the time people work or do academics, then you've got self-care, hobbies, chores. There's all these other components of life, and whatever job you have requires motor skills. So those are huge for our kids. That isn't something to be ignored. All right, what should a homeschool schedule look like? Again, routine takes 6 to 8 weeks. I just want to really plug that because it so does. And you're gonna be somewhat frustrated and wonder why it's taking so long, but it does. The other thing is to build 1 brick at a time. So maybe week 1, I'm doing spelling and chores. I got 2 bricks. Week 2, I'm doing spelling, chores, and math. Okay, week 3, spelling, chores, math, and geography. So you're building. Right now, since this whole transition, we finished our school year for our homeschool, and I've been building the last 3 weeks, and I'm gonna add math next week because we're going, it's getting somewhere, and I'm like, we can add something now. So you'll kind of get a feel. If it's all terrible, don't add something. Go backwards a little bit and find your groove. I like to call it be wise, prioritize. And one of my favorite friends told me, you need to figure out what is your minimum for today to count as a school day or a success. So for me, that's like math and reading. If we did math and reading, today was a win. So you need to have a minimum, because you might be like, we're gonna do math and reading and fine arts and music, and you're gonna get crazy. And no day is going to ever turn out, and you're gonna feel Like, that's a rough thing. So be wise, prioritize. What is most important to you? Is that working on your child's deficit because they're poor in spelling? Is that working on robotics because that's an interest of them, for them? Choose. And then also to decide, are you going to go for time or task? Sometimes with my son, I think I'm going to have him read for 20 minutes. I'm going for time, not that he reads the whole book. I'm saying we're going to read out loud every day for 20 minutes. Or am I saying the task being we're going to write all these spelling words every day? I don't care how long it takes. We're just going to write all these words every day. So you need to decide in that moment, am I going for time or task? Because that, I think, can make a huge difference. Also, be aware that you're human and your children are human, and there's going to be a tolerance for both of you. So sometimes your tolerance is going to be you didn't sleep, you're out of coffee, so it's going to be a math and reading only kind of day. And some days you slept well, you're in a great mood. It's going to be I'm going to break out paint kind of day. We're human, they're human, and that's going to ebb and flow. Sometimes when you're having a great day, they're having a terrible day. So be accommodating of those kinds of things because, I mean, homeschooling is messy. I mean, life is messy, right? But having grace with ourselves and one another is what helps us journey for the long term. All right. Also, for homeschooling schedule, I often sometimes am sitting down for a particular lesson and my child wants to give up. And sometimes I'm thinking, is this about a character moment or is this about me wanting them to finish the math? So kind of figuring out, am I going for a heart issue, a character building moment like we don't quit, or am I need you to finish the math? So kind of that's in the self-evaluation moment. Sometimes I find myself getting upset and I realize it's not that I'm being unrealistic, I'm just being ridiculous and petty. So do a kind of a self-evaluation at times. All right, which curriculum should I choose? You know, when I first started, I just thought if I buy all the pretty books, I'm going to be so good at this. Basically, the real important thing is consistency trumps methodology. So whatever you pick, like with that geography thing, if I do it every day for 5 minutes all year, we'll probably know most of the world. Consistency trumps methodology. So there is no perfect curriculum. First of all, that's like finding a unicorn. There is no perfect curriculum, but there is a curriculum that you both do not hate. So if I love a curriculum and my child hates it, pitch it. If my child loves a curriculum and I hate it, pitch it. Do you know why? Because I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be like, oh, that math, even if they love it. So you need to decide and find one that you both can live with. And I would also say that takes 6 to 8 weeks. So don't be in like week 1, this thing's horrible. Like nobody's adjusted, you or them, okay? So give things a fair trial. We're back to that 6 to 8 weeks. Also with the learning channels, maybe your kid needs to stand up while doing their math. Maybe your kid needs to roll around first before doing an assignment. Think about not every curriculum meets every learning style, but you can accommodate that. Like my son prefers, my little guy likes songs over chants. So there's like a little chant in his book. I just put it to a tune. I can't sing, but he remembers it anyways. So, and then my final thing I'm going to say about curriculum and about homeschooling, crisis schooling, teaching your child at home, whatever you want to call it, is you're either doing, you're dabbling, or you're declining. So either do the geography every day or whatever you've decided is a priority for you, or do it a little bit and you're going to get maybe a little bit of something. Or if you decline, if you're saying, no, I am not teaching him geography every day, then own that it's a no. Or that you hate math, so you don't teach him. You need to own that you don't teach him math and find a tutor or ask your husband or a friend to do that, because you can't just skip a subject because you don't like it, okay? So you're either doing dabbling or declining. If you dabble for 6 weeks and you tell me it doesn't work, that's because you dabbled. That's not a definitive answer. So you need to think about which am I doing and in which area do I want to change. Maybe I'm dabbling in something and I want to move it to the do list. Maybe I'm doing something and it's not that important to me. It was just important to my cousin. Move it over to dabble or decline. Your priorities are going to be different because you know your child and you know what's best for them and what's best for you as a mama. So that's my notes, guys.
That's excellent. Thank you, Emma. At this time, what I'd like to encourage everyone to do, if you have questions, this is the perfect time to put them in the chat bar. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over and I'm going to share my screen with you. And we're going to tell you a little bit about neurodevelopmental movement. And when we come back, Emma will tell you a little bit about how she incorporates neurodevelopmental movement into her homeschooling routine. After we do that, we'll have question and answer period. Okay, so go ahead, start typing your questions.
Hi there, my name is Jocelyn Williams, founder and executive director of Neurali Solutions Incorporated, also known as Neurali. Neurali provides a movement-based educational approach to equipping the brain for life. The work of Neurali is based on the infant developmental sequence. Every human infant was designed to go through a simple process that would equip the foundational levels of the brain. This part of the brain is responsible for all of our automatic functions, such as bonding, emotional regulation, focus, sensory processing, and more. The developmental sequence for infants is as simple as A, B, and C. A. From birth, infants need to be on their tummies approximately 50% of a 24-hour period. We call this tummy all the time. B. Tummy all the time will lead to tummy crawling, which includes the belly button being flat on the ground and baby moving forward. This form of locomotion is similar to an army crawl. Not exactly, but very similar. And here's the tip. If a baby doesn't need mittens, they do not need socks. When a baby is engaging in tummy crawling, all a baby needs is a comfortable onesie and a safe floor to crawl around on. C. At approximately 6 to 12 months, babies need an ample amount of time to creep on their hands and knees. Notice the position of the baby. Baby is up on all fours and the belly button is no longer touching the ground. Babies should continue creeping until their creep has developed into an efficient cross-lateral movement. When an infant engages in the developmental sequence, they are given equal access and opportunity to be equipped for life. Some examples are a baby who is a happy little soul, one who is bonded with their primary caretaker, a child who is socially, emotionally equipped to have healthy peer interactions, a student who is able to learn well, and finally, an adult who has the strength needed to make a positive global impact. In summary, the developmental sequence for infants is as simple as A, B, and C. However, the impact is profound. Why? Because the developmental sequence is not a man-made program. It is a process designed to equip the brain for life. At Neurali, we work with infants, children, students, and even adults. Our process is quite simple. The steps include the following: setting up a video or in-person assessment with our developmental movement consultant, the baby, and the primary caretaker. Training. The developmental movement consultant will review the results of the assessment with the primary caretaker and provide training in the elements of the developmental sequence that baby needs. The primary caretaker will then be given a daily movement plan and support protocols to ensure that baby has equal access and opportunity to complete the infant developmental sequence. For older children, students, and adults, we replicate the developmental sequence. This pathway is called neurodevelopmental movement and is based on neuroplasticity. When given the right triggers, the brain is able to change. In other words, there is hope. There is a second chance. Please contact us for more information about neurodevelopmental movement, the developmental sequence, or to schedule an assessment. You may contact us at 317-936-6797 or email us at jwilliams@nsibrain.com. Please remember that all babies need lots of movement.
All right. Thank you for taking a moment to listen to that little presentation on the infant developmental sequence. And what is so significant to those of you who are here with us, whether you have an infant or not, is that we can replicate the developmental sequence, giving older children, students, and adults a second chance. And Emma, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about your experience with neurodevelopmental movement and how you've incorporated that into your homeschool program?
Yes, we've been working with Jocelyn. I was trying to figure it out over a couple of years now. And I started with my oldest son because he's the trickiest. And we saw huge gains in his motor, his sensory, his anxiety, and just, leaps and bounds. Lots of wonderful, wonderful things. And then a year ago, I started my 5 and 10-year-old. Well, she was 9 at the time. But I found out my 5-year-old, while being incredibly social, said that an A and a B look the same. And so then I just made them bigger. Still, like the idea that a symbol represented something, 6s and 9s were the same. So I decided to start him in some program. And then my middle daughter, I would describe as quirky. She talks really loud and close and is dramatic but highly intelligent, but socially difficult. So we started a program with both of them. My daughter she has a conscience, which is huge. She is able to control her emotions far more. She's picking up on social cues and socially aware. She's able to articulate her feelings. It's been really wonderful for our relationship between myself and her. And my little guy, I finally started teaching him to read 2 weeks ago, and he's remembering all the things, and it seems to make sense. And It's super exciting because a year ago, he looked at me like I had lost my ever-loving mind. I tried to teach him A for 6 weeks. And I just thought, like, if I were a better teacher, this would work out. But it was literally like a brain disconnect somewhere that is now connecting correctly. And he just looks at me like, this is easy. It's like, you don't remember last year. So that's pretty great. So it's fun to see them flourish and then not have to carry those struggles with them throughout their lives. Like my daughter being brilliantly smart, but going home alone, or my son being very charismatic, like salesman type, but struggling in school. So I'm glad that those issues will be resolved as a result of redoing the developmental sequence, which is a lot of work, but It's work now for future payoff indefinitely. So I'm really blessed to do it. And I'm so, so, so glad. Because my life is better. Their life is better. It's better.
Wow. And how do you incorporate neurodevelopmental movement into your homeschooling curriculum and into your day?
Right. We listen to audiobooks wherever we're doing our exercises. We listen to songs during some of our exercises. So they're hearing like their history audio or whatever else. And so since we have to do exercises and we have to do history, we marry them together and it's wonderful. So everything gets done.
I love it. I love it. All right. We're going to dive into some questions now. Okay. Oh, by the way, we have greetings from West Virginia. Hi, Emma. My son can spell on the board, but when we try to work on motor skills like pre-writing or anything else, it ends up with a fight and we both give up. Any ideas to make writing interesting and motivating?
All right. Writing is really, really, really hard. So if I am assuming that your son has, or yes, your son has several motor challenges, writing is up there in difficulty. I would start with something a little easier that has more payoff. Like, for example, some of the things we started with were putting on our shoes, zipping our jackets, folding our own laundry. They're all bigger motor things, but they all work out all those muscles that could then lead to writing eventually, but you're getting much bigger payoff. These are things I can now do myself. Whereas writing is a huge challenge if you don't have hand control. So you need to do other things that have huge self-care and independent benefit because all of us want independence. And I think once he sees that payoff, the writing will seem more appealing to engage in because it's that much harder.
That's awesome. Thank you. The next question is, and somebody made a comment and said, RPM, nonverbal, smart. And I remember working with one of my clients, a friend of yours, that you referred over to me. And this child was actually almost a young adult. So he was older. And I was talking to him like a baby. And he was getting so agitated. And I caught myself. And I said, I apologize. I need to stop. You're an adult and you understand everything that I'm saying. And I changed my tone and I began to speak to him like a young man and he calmed all the way down. It was beautiful. And so yes, absolutely 100% RPM. Children who are nonverbal are super smart. And I encourage you to get Emma's book because she dives into that on, in the first 16 pages of her book. I know because I read about it. How do you manage audiobooks for an age range like 4 years old to 12 years old? So
I love
a 4-year-old, yes, you got it.
This is why classical literature. For example, I just read the Phantom Tollbooth book to my children, and my 5-year-old loved it, and my 12-year-old loved it. Because it's got a lot of interesting language and imagery. If you take like the Chronicles of Narnia, Harry Potter, you only want the first few because they get a little dark. But there's a lot of high quality literature, especially, again, older stuff that you think maybe my kids aren't going to get it, but your 4-year-old will get more than you think. And in homeschool terms, we want to kind of aim to the highest denominator because the little one's going to learn some stuff either way. But you want to aim for the higher kid because they're going to learn the most. But that little 4-year-old's going to come over and tell you all about how to sail a ship after reading Swallows in Amazon, and you thought he didn't understand some of it. So I say go classic.
Love it. Next question. Can you provide some links with the resources you mentioned? So Emma, if you can, that's awesome. If you can send those to me, and when I send my follow-up email, we'll get those out to everyone. Do you have suggestions for songs for math?
Yes, I will send those in the links. There's also several on YouTube. So like sometimes I would pick the one as you as mom are okay with listening to. I tend to play everything 6 to 7 times every day over the course of a week and then put it in a rotation repeated cycle. If I introduce a new one, still add it in a few times the following week. So it has to be something you, mama, don't hate.
And what do you put that on? How do the kids listen to that?
I have one of those little Party Power Bluetooth speakers, and I put all the songs on my phone, or I have a YouTube list on my account on my phone, so I can just, for this week, these are our things, and plug and play. So even if they go outside, I follow them with the speaker.
I love it. How do you begin to research a curriculum, especially for older children, for example, high school students?
Kathy Duffy, which we'll put in the links as well in the email, she has like a review site where she reviews all of the curriculums. One thing that would be worth looking at is kind of figuring out your teaching philosophy, which there are several quizzes online you can find. So in this high school curriculum, are you looking for books? Are you looking for books with audio? Are you looking for video lectures with worksheets? Kind of figuring out which medium you want will help you narrow down, and then going from there, if that makes sense. So the Kathy Duffy is great.
Kathy with a C or Kathy with a K?
I think it's a K, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Are there any curricula that you'd recommend?
Again, this is preference, but right now we're doing Apologia Science, and one of the main reasons is there's the book and there's also the audio. So I can play the audio while we're doing our exercises. We can still reference the book, look at the pictures, point to all the bones on the body, or whatever we want to do with that. But I find that sometimes if I always have to get out 15 books, I'm not going to do it. So kind of knowing yourself. So I love Apologia for Science and their high school stuff, their junior high stuff. It's really, really good. It's very thorough. So kids that like science will like it. Other kids might find it a little intense. So that would be, again, a preference thing. I like the Institute of Excellence in Writing in terms of writing curriculum. Language arts, I really like Susan Wise Bauer's Well-Trained Mind. I mean, I can send a list to Jocelyn to go on the email, but these are my preferences. So there's thousands of things, but at least it's a starting point for you to look at and see if you like them. Once COVID is done, you can get a lot of homeschool curriculum books through your local library, because then you can find out if you like them. So and then thriftbooks.com is your friend.
Thriftbooks.com. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm reading this question correctly. So Pani, you can feel free to jump in here if I'm misunderstanding the question. How do you choose a curriculum for 4-year-olds? I think that's what's being asked.
Okay. I would say that I'm unconventional. With a 4-year-old, I wouldn't like freak out or anything. I would read, I would look for books with medals on them, Caldecott winners, all these different things. And I think with 4, it's more about exposure. Read to your child, engage your child in your day. If you're planting a garden, like everybody and their mother right now, take your kid out there. Find the worms. Tell your kid that the worms enrich the soil. You know, check on the plants every day and measure them next to your kid's little finger. You know, experiences are what a 4-year-old remembers. So I would aim more at exposure and enjoying there are lots of learning that happens in your day. And read. You can never read enough.
How much time should we spend every day on motor skill development? Excellent
Question. We're back to tolerance. What can you and your person tolerate? So, for example, when I taught Phil to tie his shoes, we worked on it 1 minute a day for a year. And in a year, he tied his shoes. He doesn't want to know. He knows this is hard, so he doesn't want to be harassed for a whole year, 20 minutes, 3 times a week, tying his shoes. That sucks for everybody. So we're back to that consistency trumps methodology. 1 minute doing something that's really hard is enough. You do really hard things, but often as an adult, you do what you're good at and you avoid hard things, right? That's what we do. So when stuff is hard for our kids, I would say start with 1 minute And I personally, which you can read about in my book, I picked things at first motor development wise that benefited me. I wanted him to zip his jacket and put his shoes on so that I didn't have to do it when we left. And then that helped. That was motivating for me to do every day, because who wins? I mean, both of us. He gets independence and I get out the door. So we ultimately ended up doing 2 20-minute sessions per day on motor skill development, but we built up to that. And I paired easy, hard, easy, hard. It wasn't a whole bunch of hard, because nobody wants to do a whole bunch of hard.
That's awesome. Here's another question, and I like to take it from a developmental movement perspective, and have you add to that as well. Oh, how can we make a child interested in reading books? We both got excited about that question. Here's what I like to share about that, and also even about the fine motor skills and motor development. Neurodevelopmental movement helps so much with this. I had one of my clients came in, did not like to read at all, hated it, not interested. We took him through neurodevelopmental movement, got his eyes working together properly. He loves to read. His teachers, what did you do with this child? He now loves to read. He will pick up a book and read on his own. And so that's from a neurodevelopmental movement perspective. If oftentimes we will find that kids, if their eyes are not working together, if their eyes are not converging, okay, working together to look at the same thing at the same time, or they cannot track horizontally or vertically, this will make the reading very, very, very difficult. So if we get the eyes working together, oftentimes reading comes. Emma?
I love that. And I want to add that when you have a child that is different, reading it's ridiculous. You have to have the motor skill to hold the book, the eye tracking to track, the visual attention to stay there. Then you have to decode it. Then you have, you're saying each of the sounds, then you got to try and make your mouth say them, or you got to try and piece that together and then answer some comprehension questions. So I got to hold the book, look at it, sustain my attention, decode it, and then answer your question. That's ridiculous. So I would say, in terms of making your child interested, I would go with audiobooks and then doing something like neurodevelopmental movement, or even starting with cards with like very big words. Yeah. And doing like a series of 10 words and then making those 10 words into a sentence and kind of showing them. And then I started when I taught my son to read, we started huge, smaller, you can change the font on your computer like this. And then I even had to change, it got smaller, but I didn't make the gap smaller, because books do that. They get smaller and they make the gap smaller because they're trying to kill you. So there's all these things. So to make it so much easier, we went big and slowly got smaller as his eyes adjusted. So he wasn't decoding and tracking and all these things. And then once I got smaller, I used words he already knew because I was aiming for tracking. One skill at a time, because if the difficulty is too much, they're gonna quit. Just like you and I would. Do I want to climb Everest? No. And even if I did, the difficulty for a lot of people is just too much.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. I like to jump in here because it's getting close to 9 o'clock. We will go past 9 o'clock. We started a little bit later, and so we're going to go ahead and go past, if that's okay with you, Emma?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we'll just want to let those of you who must leave now, I just want to give you a heads up that next week we're going to have another webinar. And this webinar, our guest speaker is going to be Betty Lamont. She is known as the Brain Nanny. Betty Lamont actually trained me in neurodevelopmental movement, and she is phenomenal. You are going to want to be on this webinar. The title of the webinar is Identifying and Overcoming Brain Trauma. Identifying and Overcoming Brain Trauma. And if your child is having difficulty in nonverbal and so on and so forth, we can just go in. There is most likely some brain trauma that has happened that can actually be helped. And so I just want to encourage you to join us next week. In the chat bar at the bottom is the link, and the registration for that webinar opens up right now at 9 o'clock. Okay, so let's go back to questions for Emma. Emma, can you please talk a little bit about proof of academic progress needed to be submitted at academic year end? New homeschooling parent here. My child is non-speaking RPMer, severely impacted by autism.
All right. Well, in all honesty, I live in Illinois and they don't care. But if I were to have to do something more rigid that I had to show progress, I would probably take video. I would record certain answers to questions, or maybe once a week do a multiple choice type test, something to show that your child learned whatever it is you set out to learn. I would keep it short and to the point for the sake of your child, because RPM doesn't recommend testing. That's not really a wonderful thing for our kids. So, but if you show video footage of improvement, video footage, and then maybe catalog of answers from your child, I would think that that would be sufficient, because frankly, the school doesn't know what to do either, do they? The fact that you're putting effort in and keeping some sort of track, I think would be, if I were the evaluator, would be impressive to me.
Mm-hmm. And each state and each country is going to look at that differently. Yes. So you're going to want to make sure that you check in with your country and your state. I know things are very loose in certain states and very tight in others. So check in with your country and state about that. Another question, struggling with activities that can engage a 4-year-old and 12-year-old who cannot do any activity independently.
All right. I like to pick hobbies and things that age with us. So I would lean toward puzzles, looming, drawing. Even if I would seat yourself between both of them. I love Art for Kids Hub, which gives you step-by-step drawings, which we can put in the email, so that if you're with your RPM child, you're holding the board up, but you have your 4-year-old on the other side, you can kind of make little gestures too as needed. I would really aim for things that age well. Like you can puzzle forever, you can do Scrabble forever, you can play Sorry forever, Rummy Cube. There's a lot of board games and things that you can do across the board, as well as hobbies. So I would aim at doing those. And then sometimes just be okay with a mess. You know, get some paint out on the deck, and maybe your child doesn't engage for very long and you bring them back every 5 minutes while you're still cooking the food inside. That's okay too.
Okay, Mrs. Cag, C-A-G is the last name. Can you give examples of, can you talk about cost and location of this program? I'm not sure if she's referring to RPM or neurodevelopmental movement. So.
Okay, well, oh, she wrote it.
Neuro. Okay, so neurodevelopmental movement. So the cost for neurodevelopmental movement for an assessment, initial assessment, is $700, and then reassessments occur anywhere between every 8 to 12 weeks, and reassessments are $450. Now that gives you full 3-hour assessment of your child, and we go over history, we have parent training, and we review results, and you leave that day from that assessment with everything that you need to implement this plan, okay, the movement plan for your child over a 3-month period, okay, so for about 12 weeks. During that 12 weeks, this plan is personalized to your child, and you will receive one-on-one support, parent coaching sessions if necessary. And then what we do is we reassess again every 12 weeks or so. Currently, with COVID-19, we are doing all of our assessments online. So we do, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now anyway. So we provide video assessments, and then we have training videos that we send to you as support. So if you want more information about that, we can talk one-on-one about that a little bit more if you would like. Next question, can you give examples of the ABC steps for a teen? What would that look like? What are some benefits I might see? Okay, so some of the steps for a teen, believe it or not, it's going to be very similar to replicating what an infant goes through. So some of the things that your teen will be engaged in are things like lots of different exercises such as tummy crawling, okay? We'll teach you specific patterns. If you just go and have your child tummy crawl without having the input to the central nervous system, that is not going to help your child. So the three important pieces that we will work with you on is sensory, patterning, and mobility. Okay, sensory, patterning, and mobility. And giving the central nervous system this information will help your child overcome. Now, we're not going to promise if your child is nonverbal that they're going to begin speaking all of a sudden. We are not going to promise you that. But what we will tell you is that we will help your child improve and reach some of his or her goals. Okay, Emma, do you want to share some of the improvements in your child, in your children?
Yes, I have a very hyperactive oldest who never ever stopped moving. He had the most ripped legs I've ever seen in my life. And about a year into neurodevelopmental movement, he can now sit, he can sit and draw, whereas he has attention and focus now, which were big wins. But the fact that he's not constantly in motion has been amazing because it always seemed pretty neurotic. And I feel like it was like he was trying to run out of his own skin. I don't even know how to explain that. But now that's not the case for him, which must be way better. So that is a huge one. His communication improved, his sleep improved, his motor planning improved, his just ability to fend for himself and initiate. That's a big one. RPM kids, it's really hard for them to initiate activities, and he is now able to do that, which has been really wonderful.
That's awesome. Thank you. Next question. Do you test knowledge after audiobooks are done to check if kids got it?
No. Reading is fun. I check math because you got to. I check some science and history and alternating days. We read books for fun. If we're writing a book report in terms of for a school assignment, then sure, we might do like, hey, sum up this chapter in 2 words or a sentence or something. But we want kids to read for fun and enjoy it. There are a lot of things our kids have to work really hard for. They don't need to be tested about everything. Chances are you remember the books you read for fun and the parts of an animal cell. Can you tell me those? So let's be serious.
How do you assess reading comprehension in a non-speaking child?
You could do choices, but again, I would be picking my battles. I would come back to, why am I assessing comprehension for this? There is a learn, forget cycle, just like I just proved, because a bunch of you cannot name the parts of an animal cell. It's more important that we're engaging the brain in learning, and yes, we're assessing some things, but we cannot choose to assess everything because your child will kill you and you will hate it. You'll both have a bad experience. Nobody calls you after this call to test what you learned, okay? So in life, this isn't a thing all the time. There are mediums for it, and there are times not. So if you want to do that, you can use choices via RPM. I would maybe call it more of a check-in and ask an interesting question like, so if you were on the desert island, who would you want to be? And then maybe give a choice that way. So they still have to know the context of the book, but you're expanding the knowledge and making it really interesting. And a great book for finding questions like that would be The Read Aloud Family by Sarah Mackenzie.
How do you deal with severe OCD? Sometimes OCD becomes aggressive.
Well, we have a lot of that, so I can relate heavily. Staying calm really helps. And sometimes you've pushed too hard because our kids don't want to be stuck. You don't want them to be stuck. Everybody's frustrated in this situation. So I would scale back. And then I always say, you don't know where the line is till you cross it. So once you cross the line, now you know you can go here. So kind of toy with that a little bit, but stay on the side of not crossing the line as much as you can, because that creates an anxious response, which in our case we can lose hours worth of work. So it's not worth it. But again, up to you.
Does this have to be on site? We are located in Georgia. So neither neurodevelopmental movement does not have to be on site. We can do video assessments in terms of RPM. Emma, I believe you teach RPM. Do you do that on site or via video assessments?
I do that just in my local area.
Okay. Emma, how much do you spend on planning your next homeschool day? Here, I do more planning and less implementation. Implementing what I have planned always does not go well due to various reasons or behavior.
Okay, that's a great question. I spend probably 4 hours a week planning, but that is because I have found the curriculum that I like. So I kind of know what I'm going to do with it. So I love the second part of your question. You're spending this time and then the implementing doesn't go well. So you need to find out what's going to work for you. So my son right now, his OCD is such that he does not like me to speak very much. It tends to trigger him. So I am pro other audio than myself. So we use Matthew C, and he watches the math DVD, and there's a worksheet, and I can hold the board. So I've hacked. I don't have to speak. We watch the video together, and then he touches the answers. So that's one thing. Whereas if I tried to get out a math book every day and teach him a lesson verbally, that would end up in a meltdown every single time. So you need to go ahead and look at what are the triggers and what are the issues, and am I asking something unrealistic? Like my son before, when he couldn't sit and focus before neurodevelopmental movement, then I can't plan a 30-minute math lesson. I'm going to aim for one concept, 2 problems. And I'll have one leg over his lap to make sure he stays there. So then I'm going to let him go. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, I might have one concept and 3 problems. You got to build your castle slowly. Mm-hmm. And when it's not working, you want to figure out a different strategy, because you're wasting your time. Nobody's winning. So I hope that made sense.
I love it. I love it. And here are some of, just as a recap, today, some, I don't know, little words or phrases that Emma has shared with us that I took notes on is: remember, build one brick at a time, be wise, what you prioritize, consistency trumps methodology, and decide, are you going to do, dabble, or decline? Emma, it has been an honor to have you on our webinar tonight. This webinar is hosted by Neurally Solutions, and my name is Jocelyn Williams, and I am a developmental movement consultant. We are located in Indiana, and it has just been an honor to have you on our webinar tonight. Our webinar is called Homeschooling, Is It For Me? And Emma just did a great job helping us to learn how much time to invest in daily activities, how to teach limited or nonverbal children, talking about what a homeschool schedule looks like and how I should choose a curriculum. Thank you so much, Emma. And we also want to give you a big congratulations on your book. Tell us the name of your book.
Motor Matters, the importance of developing motor skills in my autistic son, my husband and
Our. Wonderful. And so I would encourage you to grab that book. And also, just as a reminder, our webinars are every Thursday at 8 p.m. And next week, we are going to have Betty Lamont. And if you have not registered, I'd encourage you to do that tonight. That is going to be another packed webinar. And you're welcome. Thank you. We had a lot of great comments here. Thanking you, Emma, and I appreciate your experience and wisdom. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. You have said so many things with which I agree 100%. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.